So recently in One Piece, and spoilers for Elbaf, but in chapter 1185, at the end of the chapter, we meet this big guy, right? In my coverage of chapter 1185, I said that he does look a bit like Shiryu, and apparently people think that as well, because I have seen a few videos talking about him specifically being Shiryu. Do I think this is correct? No. No, I do not. Because people, for some reason, have forgotten what Shiryu looks like. Shiryu has a big honking schnoz. His nose is so big, he looks like a shark almost, in the way that he's been drawn several times since his debut. So, no, the guy that we're seeing here does not have a shark nose, which means that's not Shiryu. They're dressed in a very similar way, but it's not Shiryu. Also, Shiryu is a fairly big but proportioned man. Everything is fairly normal about him. He's just really, really big. Whereas with this guy, he looks like a freak. He's got this big boxy torso with these gangly arms and legs and these huge hands. So no, again, even proportionally, that is not Shiryu. And Shiryu smokes a cigar. This guy is smoking a cigarette. That's a bit of a weaker point, but in One Piece, I've noticed they're very distinct about who smokes cigarettes and who smokes cigars. I don't know why that's such a distinct thing that goes on, but it's very distinct. So with all of that being said, I will say this. I think that there is a very, very high possibility that based on what we see in this chapter, meaning this weird mist or fog that descends upon the Asperia kingdom that then turns into smog and is responsible for ruining all the instruments of the Asperia kingdom, I think this is caused by a devil fruit. And I think the guy that we see at the end of the chapter could be the user of said devil fruit. Because the funny thing about the Holy Knights as we've seen them so far is that we haven't had a Logia in their ranks. They've all been mythical Zoans or Paramecia fruit users. So with that being said, I think this big guy at the end of chapter 1185 is the Fog Man or the Mist Man that ruined the Asperia kingdom with his abilities. Now, the funny thing about Logias is that what they generate normally isn't considered special. They aren't like special Paramecius whose generations have some sort of unique property to them. No, what Logias generate is seen as the mundane variation of that element in nature. So even when you get into more weird stuff like Blackbeard's darkness, as he explains what darkness is still considered mundane based on how he explains it. Darkness is not considered special. But when you look at Logias, the special part about them are their bodies. And I'm not just talking about the regeneration. What I'm talking about is that a lot of the times their bodies have special properties. For example, Blackbeard, when he touches a devil fruit user, he can turn off their abilities. And when he is attacked, he feels more pain than the average person. So, considering that, let's look at Caribou. Caribou is a swamp man. And in being a swamp man, he is able to generate mud. That mud is not special. However, when his body becomes mud, that mud is then infinite. He can contain anything within his body. So I think considering that being a thing in the world now, that is most likely how this supposed fog man operates. The fog generated is not special, but when his own body becomes fog, I think anything enveloped in his fog body corrodes and decays over time. Now, how the fog became smog is interesting, but I have a funny idea as to how that happened. What if, seeing as how this guy has a smoking habit, what if he smokes as he does this and the chemicals or compounds within the cigarette affects his body when it is fog, and that fog becomes smog, therefore suffocating those that are enveloped within said smog. And we've seen this before with Caesar Clown and how his gases can then interact with other instruments at his disposal. So maybe this is an extension of that kind of concept, which would be super interesting and makes this guy pretty dangerous. Now, with that being said, I do think, considering this guy may be this Fogman that we're talking about, what if in the past a Devil Fruit user with this same ability for some reason made the Florian Triangle? So the Florian Triangle, much like say Raijin Island or Punk Hazard, is a Devil Fruit affected area. It's just covered in this thick fog that you have a hard time escaping. But with that being said, that would mean that Brook's life potentially has been ruined by the same ability twice, this fog ability, which I find very interesting, and is a very odd way to swing things back around to Thriller Bark. So we'll have to wait and see if that's the case, but I do think that this guy most likely is our Logia user within the ranks of the Holy Knights. I think that's possible. And I think it's possible that the Florian Triangle is a Devil Fruit affected area, much like Punk Hazard or Raijin Island. But with that being said, if you are enjoying the video so far, click the like button. And if you want to see more from me, click the subscribe button, followed by that bell so you never miss a video. In addition to, if you want to help me out a little more, click the hype button because it really does help. With that being said, give me your thoughts and tell your friends about Polypede Works.